So we are live. Welcome to the Greatness Engineering Hour show, the show where we bring you all the champion and people who are doing amazing things in the community, in their countries, and real greatness engineer that actually come to make a difference for us and sharing their stories, sharing their knowledge, and helping us, to see that it's possible and for you later on to take action. Today we're going to the UK. We're having a special guest coming from the UK. Our guest today is Helen Ginman. She's the founder of Unique and Inclusive Wellbeing, and she's experienced in in mental health and well-being, particularly in the workplace. And she also spent time in the community, and she helps to support individuals lead happy and healthier life by making their mental health a priority. So she's got a focus today on mental health and well-being. And I know that, with what's happening right now around the world with the pandemic and a lot of, the uncertainty and the volatility happening around the world, it's going to be a very interesting subject to talk about. And I hope that you're going to learn from her. Don't forget to share if you can, to share so people can also, who don't have the opportunity to be here today, so they can learn from her as well, and hopefully connect with her if they need, if they see the need. And also, I encourage you to to have a notebook and take notes. And don't hesitate to ask questions, because I know that it's a subject that is touching every single one of us, if not us, somebody around us. So let's have this fantastic conversation on mental health, and please participate and help us to have a very interesting and insightful conversation. Let's bring Helen and start the show.
Right? On memories. But as I got older, I started to be more aware of some of the abusive sides of
Hello. Hey, Helen. Welcome to the Greatness Engineering Hour show. It's really a pleasure for me to host you today, especially, as we're going to focus on mental health and well-being, and it's really due with what's happening around the world. And I'm pretty sure in the UK, it's a big problem right now. So really welcome you to help us, know what it is and how we can manage it if we were faced with it. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, all right. So I'm just going to ask you, to introduce yourself to our audience, and let us know, a little bit about your story and the key point and how you managed to come to focus your work on mental health and well-being.
Sure. So I work with companies today on helping them create cultures where employees thrive. I help them think about how they can be better supportive of those that struggle with poor mental health, but also companies play a huge role in creating environments where we prevent poor mental health. Companies are one of the reasons why sometimes we do experience poor mental health. So I work with those companies to really help create those environments where people feel okay to raise their hands and ask for help if they're struggling with their health. And I started this business nearly 2 years ago now. And I started it because I've worked in the corporate world for a very long time, and I've experienced firsthand how impacting businesses can be towards people with their mental health. Now, they don't intentionally mean to do it. Of course they don't. Nobody goes out of their way to impact people. But certainly, through some of the discussions, some of the conversations, some of the processes, some of the ways in which companies operate can negatively impact people's lives. And there is always a choice in business that it comes down to. Businesses can make a choice to do things differently and to be able to improve that for their individuals. So I recognise this throughout those years of corporate. I have my own personal experience battling poor mental health. From a young age, I struggled with anxiety, which increased into depression in later on life. And so I've had my own personal battles having to try and cope with poor mental health, particularly in the workplace, trying to elevate my own personal career and be the best that I could be, whilst knowing that underneath I was actually really struggling with my health itself. And that's really kind of come together in the last few years, and why the business was formed, and why I do now what I do.
Okay, so that's quite interesting to understand that you yourself went through mental health, and it's sometimes difficult to define what is mental health, and I think that's something that I really want to to know and understand, what is mental health and what do we we need to look for. So let's have a small break and watch a video, and then we'll come back and really go into what mental health is all about.
We all have mental health. It is just as important as physical health. It is not only about mental illness or mental disorders. This is just one part of a bigger picture. It's best to think about mental health as being on a continuum, rather than people being either mentally ill or mentally well. We are all on the continuum, and we move up and down according to factors such as our genetic makeup and upbringing, our life circumstances, and the stresses we are under. At one end of the continuum, we have mental disorders, like depression or anxiety. And at the other end, we have states of positive mental health, when we're thriving, content, and fulfilled. The aim of mental health interventions is to move people up the continuum, so that they're able to reach their full potential and live satisfying lives. The World Health Organization describes mental health as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Being mentally healthy means being resilient and able to cope with difficult times, feeling in control, being confident, feeling good about yourself, managing and expressing your emotions, building and maintaining good relationships. We all experience periods when we feel stressed, worried, anxious, sad, afraid, or angry. These are all normal emotions. However, when these emotions become severe enough that it interferes with a person's ability to function daily, and these feelings become persistent over time, then it can develop into a mental health problem. There are many different types of mental disorders. When left untreated, mental disorders can be chronic and long-lasting and are associated with increased disability. They significantly have an impact on daily functioning and frequently interfere with family, social, and work responsibilities. Fortunately, there are effective treatments and evidence-based interventions available that aim to help individuals understand and cope with symptoms of mental illness. However, very few people with mental disorders access existing treatment services. This may be due to barriers such as the stigma attached to seeking help, the lack of understanding of mental health problems, uncertainty of how to get help, or the fear of disclosing mental health problems. Research shows that stigma remains one of the biggest factors preventing people from seeking help early for their mental health problems and getting the appropriate support they need. It is important to acknowledge that we all have mental health and have a personal responsibility to learn how we can improve and maintain our well-being in order to lead meaningful and satisfying lives.
So, I mean, what is mental health? We had, a lot of information in this video, but what I want to know is, what is mental health and what are the signs that we have to look for, and, to know that this is it, because from the video, we all have mental health, but it's just when, we start to exhibit some, extreme emotion that things start to be very difficult, and how serious it is, in the world or in your environment.
So that video was a really great video that showcases what mental health is. And if I asked all of your listeners today to draw on a piece of paper what they thought mental health was, I could guarantee that almost every single one of those pictures will be different, because how we interpret our own mental health is going to be different. Some will draw pictures of lots of unhappy faces. Some might even draw happy faces. Often when we hear the words mental health, we often associate negative connotations to it. Now, if you Googled mental health today, you would be faced by a myriad of different definitions. Google Dictionary talks about it being psychological and emotional well-being. Rethink Mental Illness talks about it from an ability to learn from others and be able to develop psychologically and emotionally. So we're talking about how we develop and grow as part of that. World Health talks about it in terms of our own abilities, being able to cope with the normal stresses of everyday life. So now we're going into the realms of resiliency. So it's unsurprising that there is a lot of confusion that exists when we actually talk about mental health and well-being. And I like to think about it in terms of the interconnection between our behaviours, thoughts and our actions, and also how our body behaves when we are under pressure. Because mental health exists on a continuum and is different from one person to another. So how it impacts people, how it affects people in every single everyday life is going to be different from one person to the other. And we fluctuate on that continuum on a daily, weekly and monthly basis. And our responsibility to ourselves, as well as businesses' responsibility to their individuals, is to look at how can we better support people that are on the continuum where they're really struggling, they're unable to cope, perhaps they're feeling overwhelmed with some of the situations that they're having to face today, and how can we support them to be able to lead more healthier lives without some of that impact that perhaps they're experiencing. And signs and symptoms are exhibited in lots of different ways. We're thinking about, if we're talking about anxiety, it might be that we're feeling very tense at a particular time. It might be that our heart rate increases. It might be that we're sweating quite a lot. I spoke to you before we went on and I said, I'm actually really quite nervous at the moment of coming on. And I felt my heart rate increase as well as that. So that, there's a start of some anxious thoughts. But if we think about our mental health in terms of how we feel and being able to respond, rather than putting labels on these, disorders, and actually, I'm feeling depressed or I'm feeling stressed. If we think about it in terms of how it's actually affecting us, we're actually going to be much better at finding a way forward. So, if you cut your finger today and it's bleeding, you're probably going to go and clean it and put a plaster on it. If you've got a headache, you might go and take a paracetamol. we take physical actions when it comes to our physical health, and so too must we when it comes to our mental health.
It's very difficult then to for people, and I've seen, you know, I've actually had, you know, people who went through, you know, depression and had, you know, due to mental health, but we don't actually people around them don't actually know if it's serious or not. And and even in some culture, we know we ignore it. We think that, okay, that's something that, you know, doesn't exist, and it becomes really a big problem. So, you know, what do you recommend in those, you know, in those situations, you know, when you feel like somebody is not, you know, behaving really well, and how do you address that? How do you approach the person? How do you make sure that, you know, the person doesn't get worse?
Yeah, so I mean, what I always say is, if we're looking for signs and symptoms, the key one is to look for behavior changes that are outside of the normal. You know, so anything that is outside of the regular way in which somebody may or may behave. So if someone comes into the office, for example, although you can't do that right now, but let's say, as an example, you come into the office and this person usually says, "Morning, everybody. Do you want a cup of tea or coffee?" And they go off. Whereas this day they came in and they check their keys on the side, they sit down, you know, they're clearly visibly stressed perhaps. You know, they are the key signs that you want to look for in behaviours, you know, in its most simplest way. And when you identify those things, sometimes people fear engaging in the conversation, you know, because they're not sure what the outcome's going to be. They're worried that they might say something wrong. And particularly in businesses where people are struggling with their health, or even if people do come forward and say, "Look, I'm struggling with my how I'm feeling at the moment," managers often feel like, what the question is what if I say something wrong? What if I say something wrong and this person goes off and, God forbid, you know, ends up self-harming or taking their own life, or I make that situation worse for them? And I always think, you know, yes, okay, sometimes you get shot down when you ask this question, but there's no reason why you can't sit that person down and say, "Look, how are you? You know, how are things going for you? I noticed today that you came in and chucked your keys on the table, and that just wasn't like you. You know, so what's going on? How can I help you? How can I support you? You know, what can I do? You know, let me be your ear." And I think it's really important that people know that they have the space to be able to talk. Doesn't mean that they necessarily have to talk. You know, not everybody wants to talk about what's going on in their lives. And, you know, if we think about it from a male perspective, and certainly the challenges we have around male suicide rates and males coming forward and talking about their mental health because of the huge stigma that exists for them, you know, sometimes it's incredibly difficult to be able to have that conversation. So we shouldn't be forcing people to do it. We should be encouraging them and letting them know that there is a space to come over. You know, I'm here for you. I'm always available to be able to listen to you if you want to have that conversation.
And that's and I think that's key, because, you know, sometimes we've seen in the videos, people are actually, it's still a taboo to go and say, "Okay, I'm suffering from, you know, depression, or I have mental health issues," and things like that. We always scared to be judged in a way, and it's important, like you said, that people around us, when they you know, they spot any discrepancy in our behavior, that they create a space for us to be able to talk and to be able to express ourselves. But then when it's been identified that you have a problem, you have mental health, what are the resources available, and what's basically the journey to manage that?
So, I mean, the key is for people to know that there is lots of choice and accessibility when it comes to supporting, you know, our own mental health and well-being. There's steps that we can take as individuals to be able to improve that. But often when we are in some of our, you know, darkest moments and struggling with our own mental health, we do need that intervention. So, you know, going to your doctor is, in the first instance, is always recommended. You know, something that they will be able to advise you professionally on the right route for you to take, given your own circumstances, given the recognition that how mental health impacts us all very, very differently, and so too will be what we do to support ourselves and to become, you know, more healthier with our mental health. They will make the recommendations, but there's also resources available online, you know, there's local charities, local support networks, there's private counselling that people can go to, you know, there's steps that people can take themselves to connect to those things. And in everybody's country, there'll be their own charity and local resources that people can contact, and I really recommend going to a lot of those, because they will be, you know, they will have people there that are experiencing similar feelings, similar emotions, going through similar difficulties and challenges in their own lives, and you will go on a journey alongside somebody, and there is a great amount of support and camaraderie. And, you know, one of the best things we can do for our mental health is to connect with others. You know, and COVID-19, I think, has shown how important relationships are to our well-being. You know, it's one of the things that we've missed as we've gone into lockdown, you know, all over the world. You know, many of us haven't been able to see friends and families, and, you know, we're doing lots of things online. And yes, that's great, because it allows us to see some people that perhaps we haven't been. But we do crave, as humans, that physical interaction, those physical relationships, the ability to be able to share a space with somebody in a physical capacity, you know, and to enjoy those moments. And I think COVID-19 has shown us how important those connections are. So when we reach out to these local support groups and these charities and other resources that are available for us, they do bring people together, and I think that's an incredibly powerful way in which people can support their own mental health and well-being, particularly when they're struggling. Mm-hmm. And you know, one of the comments you made earlier was around, mm-hmm. you know, people not able to perhaps come forward, mm-hmm. you know, with some of those sometimes. And I think, you know, despite the progress that's being made with mental health and well-being, and particularly in line with COVID-19, you know, there's lots of noise around what we can be doing mm-hmm. to promote positive well-being, there is still a huge amount of stigma that exists, not only in businesses, but, you know, wider in the community. You know, it's estimated that over 80% of people who suffer from poor mental health will experience stigma every single week. Right. Mm-hmm. So, you know, every single week, people will be experiencing some form of stigma associated to their mental illness. And if we think about what that actually means, it's because somebody's different to us. You know, somebody mm-hmm. has something different to us. So we feel that we use our language to be able to say to people that actually it's not really a big issue. You know, we hear the words such as just get on with it, just man up, particularly is a popular one for men. You know, that everyday language mm-hmm. that affects us. And some recent research showed that 95% of people bringing in work will give a different reason for their mm-hmm. illness. Mm-hmm. So even if people are struggling with poor mental health, you know, there is still a huge amount of stigma of saying that's what I'm struggling with today, mm-hmm. because of the taboo nature in which it still is, unfortunately. And don't get me wrong, there's some businesses out there that are doing phenomenally well with it, and they're making big strides with what they're doing. But, you know, unfortunately, there is still a lot of companies that just isn't tackling that stigma and that barrier. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately are creating spaces where sometimes they're, you know, people are fearing that they mm-hmm. seem incapable of being able to do their job. You know, that's the fear, is if I talk about how I'm feeling, are people going to treat me differently? Are mm-hmm. they going to see that I'm incapable of doing my job or progressing to the next level in my career? And that's mm-hmm. the fear that we have to try and, you know, remove in a workplace and challenge.
Mm-hmm. That's so a lot of information, and I hope, you know, people who are watching are really taking notes. Let's see who we have here. I see quite a lot of people. We have so Leah is watching from Germany. We have Ephraim from Australia, but he's not going to be able to stay today. And we have Anne from the UK, so watching, and also Ida is watching from the Netherlands. Important subject. Hannah here agree with the stigma comment. That's a big one. and Leah is really enjoying and the information that you are giving and acknowledging is important. It's a very important thing. But then, there's something that I wanted to ask you. Is there a difference how, women and men take, manage their, the way, because I've heard that a lot of men actually, and you mentioned it right now, is that, they're really afraid to come forward and they want to manage it on their own, and you use the term man up. And do you see this difference in your work, that women tend to manage mental health a little bit better than men?
Yeah, I mean, men are 3 times more likely to take their own life through suicide than women, so we know that today there is a real big challenge with men being able to deal with some of the difficult feelings that they have, like all of us. But there's a huge amount of stereotyping that goes in with males and females, in all different ways of life. What a woman should do, whether she should be at home doing the cooking versus what she should be doing for a career, whether she should sit on a board of directors, whether the types of work that people should be doing. And for a long time, men have been seen as the main breadwinner. They have to be very, very strong for the family unit. They have to go out. They have to get the work in. Then they're not really ones for sitting down over a cup of tea and talking about their emotions, whereas women are more likely to do that. And I think we are still battling some of those stereotypes that exist, for male and females, and how they should and shouldn't behave, and how they should and shouldn't deal with things. And there is some great work that's happening to challenge that, because clearly from the statistics, with 3 times more likely than women to take their own life, that it is a real big issue.
A big difference. Yeah,
huge. And even for physical ailments, so when a man is physically unwell, trying to get them to go to the doctors can be difficult enough, So, they're less like it, often they think it will just go away. It won't be such a big problem. It won't be an issue. I don't want to seem like a failure, because if I'm seen like a failure, I'm not good enough. And that man up phrase, just man up and deal with it. That does have that stereotypical view of what a man should do. Men just get on and deal with it. And we're trying to grapple with some of those society stereotypes that exist to try and better support those. And in my work, I've worked with a number of companies, and I often do a lot of things with everybody, but there are some times where you are working with a predominantly male organization, that sometimes they will respond better with a male trainer or a male consultant. So, I will say to them, look, actually, I'm probably not best placed to do this, and I'll pass them on to somebody that I would recommend in the work, in that space, that can talk about it from a male perspective, because they do experience things differently. And I'm all for equality and all of those types of things, but actually just being cognizant of how people engage and how people communicate and the types of conversations they can have. Sometimes it does help to have that male figure stood up there and say, look, I have struggled with my health, and let's talk about it.
And that's the thing, is just sometimes you just need somebody who understand how you communicate, and I'm pretty sure it's the same with the cultural background of the person. You probably sometimes struggle because they might see things differently, and then you might not be able to help them. And I know particularly, I've talked to a few people, in Africa. It's still a taboo. It's still a taboo. They don't even want to talk about it. Men or women, they don't want to acknowledge that it's an issue. They always think that you can cope with it and keep going. And a lot of people have died, taken their life, but we've never actually attached mental health to that. And that can be a problem. And that's my next question is, do you think we do enough? I mean, even in the UK, it's because it looks like it's still very secret type of things. Yes, there are a lot of platforms available, but it's not there's no visibility. That's if I can express myself this way.
Things are definitely changing. People are starting to challenge some of the existing stigmas that exist. We are seeing people step up in businesses and take the stage and say, look, I am struggling. And sometimes, those leaders of businesses sharing their own personal stories can have a huge impact on employees and the wider business. When you see the CEO of a massive corporation worth multi-millions of pounds saying, I have struggled with my health, can be huge impact for well-being. Do I think we're doing enough overall? Absolutely not. Not even close to enough. And there are some fabulous things that get done, and I see school interventions happening, people going into schools and talking about body image and the impact on our mental health and well-being for body image and being able to create healthier lives. I see workplace workshops, but particularly in the UK, just as an example, you can still sit on a waiting list for professional support and wait 2 years plus to receive professional support, and that's just in the UK. So I know that there is still a massive problem that exists.
And that's the thing, is that you ask for help, but it's not coming straight away, and what you do in between, it's another story. The other question that I have, because a lot of people actually medicate themselves. I mean, they use, but what's the effect? I mean, yes, you medicate yourself, but you can't do it forever. So when do you stop, and how does it work in this case?
So, I mean, if you're using medication in terms of tablets that you're taking, but, there's a course of a treatment that you go on, and particularly when it comes to things like depression and things like anxiety, it should always be done in consultation with a doctor, right? Because they know the psychological impacts. You can't just come off the medication when it comes to things that are supporting mental health, your mental health, because it's affecting your hormones, it's affecting your balance, it's affecting some of the brain functions that you're doing, it's affecting some of the neurons that is firing. So coming completely off it can have more impact than actually going on them. So always do it in consultation with your doctor, always have that conversation. And what would generally happen is people are gradually phased off it, and the dosage is reduced and gradually come off it in time. But they also have to do other things alongside that, right? Because we know that a paracetamol might take our headache away, but actually if we drink more water every day, we're going to have less likely to have the opportunity, less likely there's going to be a headache. We take precautions every day. If we go out on a bike ride and we're going on the road, we often put a helmet on, because we know that if we fall off and we hit our head and we haven't got anything to protect it, it could cause some serious damage to us. So we take precautions every day. We brush our teeth every day, because we know if we don't, they're probably going to fall out, right? So there are those physical steps that we take, and so too should we do the same thing when it comes to mental health. We should think about, how do we stay physically fit? How do we connect with other people? How do we take the time to self-reflect and be aware of how we're feeling as individuals? What can we do to make ourselves a little bit healthier when it comes to physical health, but how we can also be part of preventing it.
Okay, and we're gonna come to that, because we, like you said, and it's probably the case in the UK. We are all in lockdown or just getting out, so it's gonna be an interesting period for everybody. But we're first gonna have a break, and we're going to come back and continue our discussion. Today, our guest is Helen Ginman. Helen is focusing today on mental health and well-being, and we are having a very insightful conversation, learning a lot from Helen today. And I hope that's the case for you, because I'm learning so much today. So let's have another video, this time more focus on what's happening right now.
The coronavirus pandemic has presented us with a unique and challenging situation. It can create a great deal of anxiety and stress. Anxiety and stress, to a limited degree, can actually be very helpful. However, Taken to a significant degree, stress can create problems for us both physically as well as emotionally. So when trying to manage your stress, there are a number of strategies you can utilize. It is important to really not focus solely on those things we cannot control. In fact, what you should do is have some discussions and think about and even list those things we do have control of. Make it something that you can do together as a family. It's simple as what you're deciding to watch on television, the things that you do during the day, what you're having for dinner. Those may seem like small things that we all don't even think about during the day, but when you're in a time like this, when so much of life feels out of control, those things can feel very comforting. Do not overload on information. It is, in fact, important to understand the facts and keep up to date on to what is going on. However, you don't want to overload by watching television 24/7, staying with the newspaper, all day long. You need to take a break from that information. Think about the things in your life that you've used in the past that have helped you stay calm. Listening to music, or playing a musical instrument, or reading, talking with family members. These are all the same kinds of things that will help you during this challenging time. Think about creating new routines, whether it's games or watching certain television shows. Try some creative, artistic kinds of things that would be fun and unique. Try to incorporate your children into helping you come up with suggestions of things that would be fun to do. It's really important to understand that, again, stress and anxiety is normal. Do not try to just push it away or pretend it doesn't exist. If we try to deny it and push it down, it sometimes can create really cumbersome feelings, and it becomes more difficult to hold it back than it is just to let it out. It's okay to talk about it, it's okay to acknowledge it, and that, in fact, will help you work through it. Look at each day as a unique day. We take it one day at a time. Be very present in that day and make it the best possible day it can be. And tomorrow, creativity takes over and you make an entirely new day. But day by day, you will get through this, and that's the best way you can manage some of the stress and the anxiety that comes along with this.
So we are back with Helen, and we are having a conversation on health, mental health, and well-being. So we are, we have this pandemic. We've been through the lockdown, and have you seen, the number changing in terms of, mental health, and any increase or anything? And what are the strategy that you think obviously there's some that in the video that we could were identified, but what are the key strategy you think can help us to stay to be able to have the well-being that we want, and also be okay with our mental health?
Yeah, and I think COVID-19, and we're all at different stages as countries, coming out of it at various different stages, and we're all contending with difficult feelings about going back out into society. For a long time we've been told there's this deadly virus that exists, and it's unseen, but it can have damaging effects, and now the world's opening up again, and rightly so, people are feeling a little bit nervous around what's happening. And I think there are lots of different things that people can be doing to help promote positive mental health and well-being, and we often talk about there being five core ways really to optimize your well-being. First is around physical exercise. Yes, there's phenomenal benefits from a physical health standpoint. It can help to improve the cardiovascular, it can help to reduce the risk of heart disease and heart attacks and strokes. So we know that there are some significant benefits from that. It's even been connected with things like dementia. So we know there's benefits there, but from a mental health perspective, it can be really instrumental in helping to reduce feelings of stress. When we exercise, it releases these hormones, it releases this feel-good factor, helps to reduce some of the stress levels that we've got that are automatically firing in our body, and it helps to cut some of those and instill a little bit of calm. And of course, that then connects with our sleep and the quality of our sleep, and sleep is phenomenally important for our well-being. So there's lots of benefits that can be had from physical exercise. But it doesn't have to be, massively strenuous things. You don't have to go out and run a marathon. It can actually be taking a walk every day for 30 minutes. It can be as simple as that will still have some significant benefits to your mental health and physical health. One of the other ways is connecting with others. And I mentioned earlier on that, human relationships is fundamentally at the heart of what we crave in life. So being able to connect with others, whether that is at the moment having to do that remotely via Zoom, and getting together and having, wine tasting nights, or having a quiz, or having a coffee morning, whatever it is that you enjoy doing. I've seen people do book clubs, people that were part of a book club before that loved reading, that still want to continue that and still doing lots of reading and coming together on Zoom and doing their book reviews. So, there's lots of different ways technology can enable us to continue to connect. And whilst it doesn't necessarily mean it's physically, certainly, remotely it could be amazing. And I often say to people, it's really important that we take breaks from technology, because sometimes technology can be one of the impacting factors of our health and well-being. But of course, technology is one of the key gateways at the moment to connecting with the big wide world. So I think it's still important to take those breaks, but still recognize the value that technology provides. I think taking notice of what's around you, doing things like mindfulness, taking those moments to be able to just connect back into what's happening right here and right now. We are always worried in life about what has happened, what's going to happen, where we're going to be in the next couple of weeks. Will I have a job? Will I be able to do the things that I used to be able to do? Will I be able to, will I have a living at the end of it? There are lots of different questions we worry about on an everyday basis. And that could even be right down to what am I going to have for tea tonight? I haven't been shopping. We have to contend with different things all the time that we're asking. And sometimes just being able to connect back with the right here, the right now, whether that's going for a walk, whether that's sitting and watching a mindfulness exercise on YouTube. You can get loads of stuff there now, whether it's going and sit in the garden and just taking 10 minutes just to sit and force your brain to stop thinking about some of those things can be really powerful. I know from my own personal experience, when I was going through quite a difficult breakup, I resorted to meditation. Now, I've never meditated before, but during the time that we were going through the separation, we still lived in the same property. So it was incredibly difficult, for months living with the partner that you no longer want to be with. And of course, the difficult conversations that you end up inevitably have and how annoying things can become. I resorted to meditation because it was the only thing that could connect me with being calm and reduce my stress. And I don't meditate very often at all anymore. It's not a part of my wellbeing strategy, but in that particular time, it was really valuable. So don't be afraid to try something out, and perhaps something different than what you would have usually gone to, because you might just be surprised, pleasantly surprised on how much of an impact that might have positively. And I think learning and development is really, really good. It feeds our desire to continuously develop. There's loads of things out online at the moment that you'll be able to access, free webinars, free workshops. People are really promoting some accessibility to some of the learning development. So, if there's always something that you've wanted to learn and you're sat at home not being able to do too much, perhaps now's the opportunity to bite the ball and go for it. I think that could be quite incredible. So there's lots of different ways in which people can promote their own well-being, and it's about finding what works for you. So if running works for you, run. It has to motivate you. You have to get enjoyment from it, because if you don't, you're probably not going to do it on a regular basis. I play musical instruments. I find a huge amount of joy and satisfaction with playing those musical instruments. That they're incredibly powerful for my well-being. So I know that if I go and play the piano or go and do some singing, it's going to positively affect me. So it's identifying what works for you as an individual for when you're struggling, and being able to pull upon some of those strategies and those techniques that can then help you to come out of that feeling that you've got on some of those difficult days that we inevitably have during this time.
Mm-hmm. So, a lot of great insight and strategies, and very simple in a way, because and that's key, because sometimes we think that we need to do very difficult things or start to spend lots of money. But yet, I think that's one thing that this pandemic actually, teaches is that, we have to do with what we have, and we can do a lot with what we have. We don't need to travel. We don't need to do anything extra. I mean, like you said, physical activity, we can do it anywhere. We can connect with others, even if we don't see them, physically. There's still, the digital, the telephone, and everything, we still have an option, and connect back to nature and back to us as well, because you talked about meditation, which was a way to connect back to yourself, because you were in a difficult situation. So same here, if we are anxious and really fearful about the future, get back inside and try to see things from a different perspective, and become more positive about it. And then the learning opportunity, because we are so busy, so busy most of the time. So that's really the time to say, okay, let's sit down and have the opportunity to learn something new, so that when, everything comes back and we go out again, we've done actually something good for us. And that's really important. So
you're right. Sorry.
go ahead, Helen.
Some of the strategies that you can do are so simple, and hit the nail on the head. We have the power. We have the ability to affect how we feel, positively or negatively. We think the interconnection between how we think, how we feel, how we behave, and how our body responds. We can intervene at any of those stages and say, actually, I'm going to change the course of this, and I'm going to do something that I know makes me feel good, makes me feel alive, makes me feel connected back into the world, makes me feel happy, whatever it is. We have that power. And we don't need to be reliant on other people. The time we do is when we're in the lower steps, where we physically can't bring ourselves out of it. But a lot of time when I talk to people, they just don't know what makes them healthy. They don't know what it is that they do that promotes positive well-being. And part of that is that self-reflection journey that people have to go on and think about, how does that affect me? It might be yoga. It might be yoga in your back garden. It might be, playing with a dog for a night. Whatever it is, it's going to be unique to you and something that impacts you and positively impacts you. And once you've found that, harness it.
And that's great that you mentioned that, is that there's no formula for everybody, one formula for everybody. It's about it's individual, it's personal, and we create the space that's going to work for us, because we can't say, okay, it's working for my neighbor, so it's going to work for me. No, it's all about, it starts with us, and then we design what we need around us. So fantastic. I'm learning so much today, and it's really amazing. And I see that Anne is still there, yoga all the way. So she's apparently a yoga addict. Welcome. I like yoga as well, but I've not been doing it a lot recently. So welcome. And let's have another break, and then we'll go to the last part of the show, where I have my the question that I like to ask to my guest, and I'm always excited when I ask this question. So let's have a small break. So that was a special shout out to one of our sponsor, Gimski. Gimski standing for the God in me sees the God in you. So they're coming strong and they're going to launch pretty soon. It's a multi-stream, platform, and they're really looking at, conquering the world. So welcome back, whoever is watching. And we are here with Helen Ginman, and we are deep into having a conversation on mental health and well-being. And one thing that I wanted to ask Helen is, she's been, you've been doing all of this work, and what I'm going to ask you is that, what more impact do you want to have, as far as, mental health and well-being is concerned? Are you happy with what you've accomplished, or you want to do more?
I want to change the world. That's my goal.
That's what I wanted to hear.
I think there is so much opportunity that we as humans have to positively affect the world. Mm-hmm. And I think, I've dealt with my own personal battle of depression and anxiety. I know what it feels like to be at the depths of darkness and feel like you're never going to come out of it again. I know what it feels like when you no matter who's around you, and no matter if you've got the greatest support network, that sometimes you just feel so alone and so by yourself that actually you think there's no point being here anymore. And you make decisions that say, well, maybe I won't be here. And I don't ever want anyone to suffer in that space, knowing how hard it is and how tremendously difficult it is to come out of the other side of it. I don't ever want anyone to suffer in the darkness, by themselves and feel like that the only way out is to take their own life. And until that, where people don't suffer, I've always got a job. I've always got a job to do, to reach out to somebody, to make them feel like that they don't have to suffer alone. And so for me, the journey's just started, and it goes on, because we're always going to have situations where people are struggling with their health. And I don't want to do what I do because I've got to make a living. I do what I do because I want to make a positive impact to people's lives. I want people to come to my workshops and work with me, and to say at the end of it, thank you so much. I worked with a company and we did a series of mindfulness sessions, and this lady came in right at the beginning of this session and said, I've tried all the books, I've tried all of this stuff, it doesn't work. And I said, look, let's give it a go and see what happens. And at the end of that session, I pulled the lady aside and I said, look, is everything all right? Because you're really, you said to me at the beginning, you've tried all this stuff. So clearly I knew straight away that she's obviously contending with something difficult. And she broke down in tears, and it was an incredibly emotional moment where she just released so much of, life that had affected her, and things that happened 15, 20 years ago that were still impacting her now, that she couldn't let go. And so we signposted her to the right support and the right help, and she came back to some of my mindfulness sessions. And even though she didn't think it was going to work, I did one mindfulness session with a sunflower. And from that moment on, she said every time she's feeling stressed, every time she's feeling low, every time she's feeling emotional, she just pictures this sunflower or a field of sunflowers, and it takes her to a point where she is then feeling okay to be able to cope with what's going on in the world. Doesn't change the fact that 15 years, 20 years ago, there were difficult situations. Doesn't change the fact that she might have to go and deliver a presentation to a customer. It doesn't change some of the situations, but it changes our ability to be able to cope with it. And it's for moments like that where that person no longer has to suffer every single day, that has that ability to be able to find a way through, is why I do what I do. And the more I can do that, the better people will be.
That's fantastic. It's just fantastic because, a lot of people suffer in silence. They suffer in silence and they try to manage it on their own. And then by the time they realize they lose ground, and some of them just decide to leave this world. And that's not what we want. We really want them to, to be able to live fully and enjoy, life every day to the fullest. And it's been fantastic to have you, Helen. And I just want to ask you, how do people reach out to you? And is there anything that you have coming up that we should know about?
So the best place to get me is on LinkedIn. You can just find me by my name, Helen Ginman. You can get through to me through my website, which is www.uniwellbeing.co.uk. So by all means, reach out there, and there's email addresses and contact information on the website that you can get me. In the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be looking at interviewing a number of people that have suffered from poor mental health, and them talking about inclusivity. So how to be inclusive to everybody, regardless of some of the illnesses that exist. So that's going to be quite exciting in the next couple of weeks. So connect with me on LinkedIn, and you'll hear more about that in the next few weeks.
Fantastic. So don't hesitate. So especially if you want to know more about, well-being and mental health, and know a little bit more what Helen is doing, don't hesitate to contact her. I mean, I've put contact on the screen here. And I think that LinkedIn is the best. Like she said, LinkedIn is the best social media to connect with her. So don't hesitate, connect with her, and make sure that you continue this conversation if needed. It has been a fantastic, like I said, a fantastic discussion, and it's a subject that's still, on the table. Like I said, it's still taboo in certain area and in certain part of the world, and it's been good to have some time to talk about it and understand what are the strategies available in case somebody is alone and doesn't know where to start. So that's been really good. One thing that I want to ask you before we close out, what is the last word that you want to leave the audience with?
Always invest in yourself. Don't ever take it off the to-do list because you're too busy. You're never too busy. The one thing that stays with us the entire life is our health. So treat it well.
Good. So you've heard it. Your health should be number one. Whatever you do around doesn't, it's important, but you have to be healthy before you can do the other things. So your health is the number one thing that you have to take care of. It's been amazing. Thanks, Helen, for your input and for your insight and for your energy today. And for sharing, all this knowledge and all those strategies. And I know it's going to help so many people around. And I can see that, some people are also amazing. Thanks. Finding our own system is key. And then you have Anne as well. Great video. Thank you. So it's been amazing. Personally, I mean, I've taken notes, and there are things that I'm going to implement for myself, especially in this time of uncertainty, and make sure that my health is my number one priority. So next Friday we have a new guest, an incredible lady who's coming to have a conversation with us again, and Dr. Rosalind Willis from the US. And she's a woman of many hats. She's been doing so many amazing things, and she's a life coach and serial entrepreneur, marriage counselor, and she's certified chaplain and published author. So it's definitely going to be inspiring, an inspiring discussion. And for those who want to contact me, these are this is my detail. If you want to my email is here, my website. I'm everywhere on every single platform. So LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And for those who want to have my book, Stepping into Your Greatness, it's the right time for reading as well. So let me know. It's available on Amazon. And if you want a signed copy, please, email me, and I'll make sure I send you a signed copy as well. And for anybody listening today, if you're sharing, to a lot of people, I'm going to send you a gift. I'm going to send you an electronic copy of the book. So make sure you share and let me know how many people you've been able to share it with. So that's all for today. Like I said, it has been a very informative session, and we definitely gonna make sure you definitely have to make sure you implement what was said today, because like Helen was saying, your health is your number one priority. You can't exchange it for anything. So make sure you take care of yourself. Make sure you invest in yourself. And like I always said, don't leave anything on the table of life. Don't play with your life. And please take action, take the right action, take the right steps, so that you can, enjoy life to the fullest. So that's all for today. For now, it's gonna be bye, and I hope that I can see you. I'm gonna see you again on Friday when Dr. Rosalind is with us. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.